the unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth. It is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So today I'm going to talk about a story that's from the life of the Buddha. And it's a story that was actually almost lost. And then a woman scholar, who's a laywoman, brought the story forth. It was, there, as you may know, nothing of the Buddha's teaching was written down until over 200 years after his death. So a lot of his teaching, all of his teaching, came from stories and from his recitations, his teachings. And so if politics, as we know, can get involved in things, or prejudices, and so things can get lost. So this is a story about his stepmother, and it comes from this book, and I will read a little bit out of this book for the talk, but it's a great book, and it's called The Woman Who Raised the Buddha. And her name was Maha Prajapati. And so I recommend the book highly. So the story I'm going to talk about today takes place between the Buddha and Maha Prajapati, who was his aunt. She was his stepmother. She was the sister of his mother, and his mother, as most of us know, died 7 days after the Buddha was born. So she raised him, and she was a force in his life, and a wonderful force. So for the purpose of this Dharma talk, I'm going to call her his mother, because she was. She raised him, she took care of him, she nursed him. She was there for him, and there was a great loving bond between them, which is not told in the story often. So I'm bringing it up to light. Actually, she's rarely mentioned in the Buddhist canon, which is extremely unfortunate, because she was wise, she was compassionate, she was devoted to helping beings. She was a real exemplary human being. And for it to get lost is really kind of a shame. So here we go. The Buddha loved her dearly, by the way. There was a great loving bond between them. That's never mentioned, but he did. And she actually, in Wendy Garling in this book, talks about it. And apparently the Buddha said that she had been his mother in over 500 lives, past lives, and that there was a deep and loving bond between them. So, and why did that happen? We don't know. Maybe there was, it certainly seems that after the Buddha died, there were some monks who felt the nuns were superfluous, and what do we need? They're just temptations for us, so let's get rid of any recognition of their training or whatever. Who knows? It's just that she's a remarkable person, and let's not lose that. So I can remember, this is for me, but I remember years ago I read Great Disciples of the Buddha, which is a wonderful book. I recommend, if you haven't read it, it's great. It's got a lot of stories of the monks that were disciples of the Buddhas. And then I read it, and there was even a little section. One of the chapters was on great women at the time of the Buddha, and it was about his nuns, some of his nuns, and it was also about his lay disciples, and they're wonderful people and very inspiring. And guess what? Neither the Buddha's wife, who became a nun, nor Mahaprajapati were mentioned. And that's common, okay? It's just these two, the most important women in his life, are just completely written out of the story. So, and I can remember being really confused about that. And wondering, well, why? Why is this going on? What did they do? Were they not decent human beings that can be talked about? So, apparently Wendy Garling is a layperson, but she's a devout Buddhist, and she did a lot of research. And she actually said there's a lot of information out there that hopefully other scholars will take and write so that this will not be lost. So I'm hoping that her book is the tip of the iceberg, and that in future generations we'll have many writings about both the male and female disciples of the Buddha. So, as I said, Mahaprajapati was just a wonderful human being. She was a queen. She was married to the Buddha's father. She was considered very wise. The way she is mentioned in the Pali Canon is that usually some of the Shakya disciples of the Buddha refer to her devotedly. They say, oh, please remember, how kind she was to us when we were children, how wise she was. So she was very well loved, and later she becomes the first nun that the Buddha ordained. So she's got a story there. So a little background for those who don't know: when the Buddha was 29 years old, when he left his wife and child and the court and went off to seek, because he saw the foresights of sickness, old age, disease, and death. And he was shocked. He had been led a very sheltered life, and he was shocked to find out that happens to everyone. This is what life is about, that these are aspects of what happens to being. So he left at 29 to find out, is there a way to free one from suffering? And of course, no one in his kingdom wanted him to leave. In fact, they had spent a great deal of time and effort trying to protect him so that he would become a king. So when he left, and truly his father had a strong influence. He was the king. He wanted his son to become a warrior king also. And so he worked towards that goal. And so when the Buddha left, there was a dark cloud that descended upon the court. And there was a lot of grief, there was a lot of crying. Mahaprajapati herself cried and was so heartbroken that he left, because she loved the Buddha so much. And so apparently it's said that she cried so much that she lost her vision. So whether that's true or not, she certainly cried a lot. So anyway, the Buddha for 6 years struggled and did his training, spiritual training, worked with some teachers, and they couldn't help him go further, and eventually he became enlightened. He worked it through himself with the help that he had been given. And he began teaching after he became enlightened, but he did not go home to his kingdom to teach. And Reverend Master Jiu mentioned that. that the Buddha waited a while before he went home. And as will become obvious from when he did, after his father sent 3 times invitations for him to come, and finally the 3rd time it worked, and he said he would come home. And it's interesting, I'd always heard the Buddha waited 3 years before he came home. Actually, there are some stories that say he waited 6 years, some say he waited 12 years. So anyway, he took his time for a good reason. And when he first arrived, he was walking through the city, and he was begging for alms. That's what the monks did. And this outraged his father. His father was furious, calmed down eventually, and then went to him and questioned him why he would shame his warrior lineage by begging for food. And the Buddha calmly explained that actually he was following his lineage, the lineage of seekers and saints. And so I think the Buddha, not only was he enlightened, he knew what he was walking into when he went home. And the other thing was that his mother was just, when she heard he was enlightened, she began making a golden robe as a gift for him so that when he came home, she could give it to him. So this Dharma talk is going to be about the golden robe. Now, so she made it herself. She made this robe completely by herself. She planted the cotton, she grew it with milk apparently, and she did it. And someone was asking a servant of hers, well, why didn't she get help? I mean, she was a queen, for goodness gracious. She was beneath her caste. And what I'm going to read you is what the queen said. So, Patini responds that weaving the robe was not a task that the queen would allot to her servants because she wanted to do it herself out of love for her son. Not for want of means nor female servants, out of joy and love for the Buddha God, the teacher, she made the jewel of a cloth. She herself, with her own hands, made the seeds grow with boiled milk. She gathered them herself. She herself did the carding. She herself, indeed, wove the excellent golden cotton sheet. And they described it, shining, this jewel of a cotton cloth, like an accumulation of lightning, a piece of clothing far exceeding human dresses in refinement. It is worthy of gods. It may go well with the tender golden-colored skin of the Buddha God, the teacher. He wasn't a god, by the way. He was a human being, but that's how they were referring to them in this. I think it's safe to say she poured her whole heart into making this robe. And she was a mother. That's what mothers do. They pour their whole heart into something. And we all know that. If a mother's got her heart in the right place, that's what we do. And we all do that. I mean, think of it. We would, if we were making something for the Buddha, if the Buddha was coming here to see us and we had an opportunity to make something for him, we would do it too. We would devotedly give it our all. So the Buddha comes home and she brings the gift of the golden cloth, and it may be in 2 pieces. It was probably made to be a robe. And she bows before him with love and devotion and offers it to him. And what the Buddha does next is very interesting. He knows how deeply she loves him and how deeply he loves her. And he knows the effort she put on. It's so obvious. It's right there. You can see it. You can see the love. And he says to her, thank you very much, but it would be better, it would be more benefit for you, and it would be better if you gave this gift to the Sangha. And she's stunned. She has no idea what he's saying. So she says it again. I made this. I put all this effort into it. It's for you. And again, he says the same thing to her. It would be better for you to give it to the Sangha. Now, this happened 3 times. So, and he didn't change his mind. Okay, now I'm going to come back to this, but I'm going to tell you what happened in the story. But I think this is a very pivotal exchange for all of us. But what apparently, there are 3 different versions at least, what happened in the story. And I'm going to tell you one of them, which is that the Buddha knew what he was doing. He was pointing, obviously he was pointing to, Mom is a wonderful being, but she's attached. And there's something bigger and greater out there than our attachment. And it's the love, instead of the love going just to me, it goes to all beings. So Mahaprajapati, very sadly, but doing what the Buddha asks her, she tries to give the cloth to the Sangha. So she goes up to the monks, and no one will take it. They don't feel worthy of it. So the cloth gets passed around, and finally the Buddha says, he throws his begging bowl up into the air. People, keep in mind, this is a story. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. It's a good story. So, let it be, whatever it is. So he throws his begging bowl up into the sky and says, whoever can get my begging bowl will have the robe. So all his disciples who are arahants and can fly, they go flying up into the sky, and none of them can get the begging bowl. And there's a novice monk who's standing on the ground, who knows he can't fly, but is very sincere in his training. And he says, well, I don't know, I have a long way to go in my training, but if this begging bowl comes to me, I will honor it. And boom, the begging bowl comes to him, because he speaks a moment of truth, as it says. And then the cloth comes to him. And now there's 2 different versions. The begging bowl itself announces that this novice is going to be a future Buddha. Or there are other stories that just say that the Buddha himself turns to this novice and declares that he will be a Buddha in the future, and that he can take the gold cloth and wear it while he's in heaven. So anyway, that's a wonderful story. Stories are meant to be interesting. But I'd like to come back to, what was the Buddha trying to teach his mother, and how does it apply to us? Because it does. But before I explain it, I would like to comment about something that I heard Reverend Master Jiyu say in a Dharma talk that I was not at, but I was listening to. Was one of the talks she was giving to her monks. And she said, she had been talking, and then she paused, and she said, now I'm going to put the cat among the pigeons. And I loved that phrase, right? The moment I heard it, I thought, oh, I just immediately saw, I'm a very visual person, I immediately saw a cat going in a chicken coop of pigeons, and what would result, and the chaos. Of course, the pigeons would be outraged that there'd be a cat in their coop. the cat would be desiring to eat all the pigeons. The pigeons could be dive bombing the cat. There'd be feathers flying everywhere, poop going everywhere. It would be a mess. So why did Reverend Master say that? Reverend Master Jesus say that? Well, I don't know, but I suspect she was about to say something that people were going to squawk and kind of, oh, I don't like that, and oh, and it was about to cause a certain spiritual upheaval. And I think that phrase applies very appropriately to what the Buddha did with his mother, because everybody, even at one point when she was trying to convince him to take the robe, she said to him, I'm your mother. You're not supposed to treat mothers this way. I mean, in effect, that's what she said. And he knew that. He was deeply respectful to her and deeply devoted to her. So why did he say this? He said it because he's trying to teach her and us that there's a deeper love, that giving isn't about me, it's about know me, about not having a self invested in what we're doing and actually opening the whole thing up. So it's very interesting because in this story they have Ananda coming on behalf of Maha Prajapati and saying to the Buddha, why don't you let her give you the robe? For goodness sake, she took such good care of you, she's her mother. Well, Ananda at that time was probably 12 years old, so it wasn't really, if he was there as a little kid. He was not in the capacity of being a helper to the Buddha. But what it's saying in one sense is that perhaps the deeper teachings of the Buddha, which were supposedly, like the Diamond Sutra. The Diamond Sutra is a pithy, wonderful sutra that the Buddha gave. And there's some question, well, did the Buddha really give that sutra? It was recorded after later. But maybe he did, because Ananda could have not been there when he gave the Diamond Sutra. And this very robe is pointing to his teaching on the Diamond Sutra. So I find it very interesting. There's a connection here that's really important because I have to understand, for me, when the Buddha does something and I don't understand it, I have faith that he was a very wise person, wiser than I am, and that he knew how to help beings. And so the Diamond Sutra, I'm going to read a couple of little parts of the Diamond Sutra, and I think you'll see how it responds to what's going on here. So Subhuti asks the Buddha, he says to the Buddha, let me see if I can get my part first. Subhuti asked the Buddha, when good men and good women commit themselves to highest complete enlightenment, on what should they base themselves, and how should they subdue their minds? And then the Buddha responds, not directly. That's the second verse. And then the fourth verse, the Buddha says, moreover, Subhuti, within this phenomenal world, a bodhisattva is an enlightened being. Maha Prajapati was a bodhisattva, a being who is compassionate and concerned and helps other beings and has the concern of others above themselves. So he says, within this phenomenal world, a bodhisattva ought to practice generosity without basing it on anything. This means that they should not base their generosity on form. They should not base their generosity on sound, smell, taste, touch, or thought. Subhuti, the generosity of a bodhisattva should be like this, and should not be based on any lakshana whatsoever. Lakshana is phenomena. It's lakshana is self, or something that seems we perceive as solid, but is not solid. So it should not be based on any lakshana whatsoever. And why is this? If this generosity of a bodhisattva is not based on any lakshana whatsoever, then their goodness will be immeasurable. Subhuti, when a bodhisattva is not based on lakshana, their goodness is as immeasurable as space. So for me, I was actually excited by this. I love the Diamond Sutra, and I was really godsmacked by the story of the Buddha and his mother, because he's actually teaching her the Diamond Sutra. He's saying, don't be stuck in parental love, expand it to the universal love, to the love for all beings. See something bigger than how we take it. So, of course that applies to me, because I am not only a monk, but I am a mother. And I have been conflicted in my monastic training with this very bond, the bond of a mother and the bond of a monk. And I have trained and indeed understand the value of stepping back from the world, seeing that the draws of the world are empty and not real and not of importance. And I still deeply love my daughter, and I am training with that conflict. And so of course I love this story, because it's speaking to me, but I think it's speaking to all of us. We're all prone to attachment. We're all prone to wanting to love and then have our stickiness get in the way of that love. That creates suffering for all of us. So, and it's the cat in the pigeon coop for sure, because you get a lot of things going on. So, but in the Dharma itself, it talks about the truth of a mother's love in its deepest expression cannot be severed. And because I think that love represents the love of the Buddha nature and the love for all beings. So, and many times in the sutras, there are lines that say, love others just as a mother seeks to benefit her most wayward child. So this is the pigeon coop we're in with the cat. It's hard. It's hard not to be attached, not to be blinded, and I don't have an answer. And I do know, though, that I feel like the Buddha and his mother, Maha Prajapati, was an exploration of that koan, because she actually did what he said. She said, I don't understand what you're asking of me, but yes, I'll do it. That was really good. That was mother extraordinaire. And also, he never stopped loving her. He was deeply respectful to her, and his whole life. So it isn't about cutting somebody off. It's about working with the conundrum. And we're all, whether we're parents or not, we all have this conundrum. We all have the struggle of not being selfish, not being concerned more about ourselves than we are about others. And that indeed, that's what a bodhisattva training is about learning to care about others more than yourself. So, yeah, and I think we relate to Maha Prajapati, who we've all done things where we put our whole heart in it, and it went, and that happens. And so, and why I love this story is I think that the Buddha was expressing he was giving a gift to his mother that she could stretch herself to understand a deeper and more profound truth than just loving your kid. That there was a world out there for her. And of course she was already doing that. She was kind and beneficial to many, many people. But that's what we're really working on with this Golden Row. We are working on how to transform love from individual to expand it and transcend it to the whole world. And her work is, her story is in little patches. So it took her a while, I'm sure. But when the Buddha came back to help his father die, after his father died and the funeral was done, Maha Prajapati said, I want to become a nun. And he said, not now. And he left. And so she and a large group of women followed where he went. And they shaved their heads and they went barefoot, like the monks did. And they walked to the next town or kingdom, wherever the Buddha was. And they asked again, and he ordained them. And he ordained her first. And she was an incredible gift to the Sangha. She was sensible, she was used to knowing how to settle disputes between people. She was really an incredible gift to the Sangha. She herself was. And when she was dying, the Buddha came to her. She died shortly before he did. She was about, I'm guessing she was probably 20 years older than him, 25 years maybe. But so she was probably around 100. And when she died, he came to her and he said, Mother, show them what spiritual gifts a woman has attained. And so she did. When she died, there were all kinds of miracles. And in fact, there were more miracles when she died than anybody else except the Buddha. So, in effect, she probably became a Buddha herself. No wonder they hid her story. Blasphemous. So, actually, these coming upon these stories of Maha Prajapati for me have been a real relief, because there was this hole in the in Buddhism. We have these. His mother died after 7 days, and great, she's a saint up in heaven, and that's it. And wait a minute, no, there's all these other wonderful nuns who trained hard and manifested the Buddha's teaching. And if I'm not mistaken, before the Buddha started teaching, when he was about to teach, he said, I'm going to stay in the world until there are 4 classes of Buddhists: male monastics, female monastics, male laity, female laity. He said, then once those are established, I can go. So anyway, it was obviously important to him that there be a female Sangha. So I encourage you to read about this most courageous woman, Maha Prajapati, and it gives me great joy, and she's really she is the example of what happens when we let go of how we think it should go, and then it goes to something far greater that we're still experiencing right now. So I think that's really, that's what it's about. So thank you very much.